and he works on topics related to the geography of well-being, happiness, and issues relating to diversity. And he was based at the University of Sheffield until quite recently, but in 2015 he took a leave of absence and he was in Lesvos at the time of the crisis, so that's what sparked his interest. So he will talk about his experiences in the context of the work that he does in geography. And Vicky Yiagopoulou is a volunteer in Lesvos, and she works on several initiatives that bring together refugees and local residents. In particular, she will talk about her work for the NGO, the Office of Displaced Designers.
Thank you very much. We are delighted to be here. As Maria said, we've been in Lesvos in 2015 when there has been a huge increase in numbers of refugees arriving in the Greek islands at the time. So I took up the leave of absence Maria mentioned started in April 2015, and just before that I took a University of Sheffield field class to Lesvos to explore island economies, and the refugee crisis was something that we were considering, but it was not supposed to be a major theme. So I will be talking about my experience with the students and some further reflections on what we saw in 2015, and then Vicky will provide an overview of some more specific initiatives by local volunteers and fantastic, inspiring work by NGOs in the island, both local volunteers and volunteers from all over the world. So before we do that, I will also give a very brief historical overview for those of you not familiar with the historical background in Greece and Southeast Europe. I think it's important because there are a lot of analogies there between what we see now and what happened 100 years ago. And to some extent, you could say that this might help explain the attitudes of the local population that, on average, I would say much more welcoming towards refugees than other parts of Europe. Although, having said that, everywhere in Europe has a refugee memory, collective memory. So it's a lot of interesting things to reflect on. The photograph you see here is from northern Lesvos. Is near the so-called mountain of life vests, where an estimated 500,000 life vests abandoned in the northern shores of Lesvos, and this is the work of volunteers. This effort you see here, and there are a lot of ongoing efforts relevant to that, recycling materials, trying to support, raise awareness using these life vests, and a lot of them are, I have to say, also counterfeits. Quite shocking if you go there. So. A few words about where we are based. Mytilene, that's the waterfront of Mytilene. It's a very, very beautiful city, the capital of the island of Lesvos. Lesvos has a population of 85,000 people, approximately, and Mytilene about 35,000. And Lesvos is located in one of the least affluent regions of Greece. Which, as you know, has lost about a quarter of its GDP due to the massive crisis over the last 7 years. So that's the background. Having said that, we should also stress that even though it is the least affluent region, one of the least affluent regions of Greece, Greece is still an extremely affluent country in a world context. So we need to remember that. And also, when we talk about the refugee crisis and the world crisis, I think it's important to remember that even though this is a crisis for Lesvos and for Europe, the numbers are very small compared to what we have in Jordan and other places. So we need to put that into perspective as well, I think. So Lesvos has been is at one of the least affluent regions, as I said. 100 years ago, this wasn't the case. The population of Lesvos 100 years ago was about nearly 150,000, so nearly double what it is today. And it was an extremely affluent region of Southeast Europe. It was part of the Minor Asia region, which is now part of the Republic of Turkey, and very near to thriving urban centers and cultural centers with predominantly Greek populations, Greek-speaking populations for thousands of years. So Lesvos was a major trading point that was thriving 100 years ago, and Mytilene had a very long urban tradition, a lot of industry and trade, and also linked to the other side of the Aegean. And all this ended 100 years ago. There was a very turbulent time in Southeast Europe, the Balkan Wars, the First World War, and followed by the Greek-Turkish War between 1919 and 1922, which ended disastrously for the Greek populations living in Minor Asia. So we had this, for example, the city of Smyrna, today Izmir, was a major center of cultural and economic center for Greek-speaking populations. The University of the Aegean, where I'm currently based, was originally meant to be there. The Air Force Defense Center was founded in 1920, but then it had to be abandoned because of the war and the outcome of that war with Turkey. There has been an estimated 1.2 million Greek-speaking Greek populations fleeing Turkey, what is today Turkey, and arriving, a lot of them using boats not very dissimilar to what we saw in the media today, and a lot of them swimming as well, and arriving in the source of the Greek islands, Lesvos and Chios, and then distributed across across Greece. So we're talking about 1.2 million people back then, and this was followed by similar displacements of Muslim populations or Turkic-speaking populations from what is today Greece. There was an agreement between Turkey and Greece to exchange populations, so the populations were displaced by 1923 as part of the Treaty of Lausanne. So what I'm trying to say here is that a lot of the populations across this region have a collective memory of displacements and refugees. These are some photographs from 1922. Smyrna, Izmir today, was a city. The Greek quarters were burned to the ground. You can find a lot of information on also live footage, video footage in YouTube. Some images here, which I think will be interesting to reflect on in relation to what's going on now. And just a snapshot very briefly of an example of the displacement 100 years ago, what happened as a result of the wars and conflict throughout the first 25 years of the 20th century in this region of Europe. So, and you can see everywhere, it's mostly Greeks affected, I suppose, but it's also any other nation in today's Southeast Europe. There has been some displacement. We've been to Turkey, and you hear stories of people talking about grandparents who used to be in northern Greece or Crete and had to leave as part of the Treaty of Lausanne. So it is against this background, and Lesvos, as I said, was a major landing point back then, and it is now, and again, there are some photographs here from 1922. And this is one of the landmarks of Mytilene, the capital of Lesvos, a statue to the Minor Asia Mother, dedicated to the refugees of 1922. This screenshot is from a website that one of my University of Sheffield students created as part of the coursework for their project, reflecting on the themes we covered. And this statue is at the same point where there were landings back in 1922, and there were some landings in more recently, refugee arrivals, especially in 2015. And this is one of my favorite mottos. You see this graffiti a lot in Greece. It reads, "Οι παππούδες μας πρόσφυγες." This means our grandparents were refugees. Then the next one is "Οι γονείς μας μετανάστες." Our parents were migrants. It's a reference mostly to what happened after the Second World War, when Greece was again destroyed due to the Second World War, Nazi occupation and civil war, and a lot of people migrated mostly to Northern Europe. So our parents are migrants. And then the last one is, this is the Greek question mark here, and then it says, "Are we going to be racist? Question mark." So that's a reference to a lot of the, you could say this could be linked to the explaining the social attitudes. This is the Minor Asia statue, the Minor Asia Mother statue I mentioned. And this last photograph here, on the bottom right corner, you can see some clothes hanging there to dry. This photograph was taken by one of the colleagues of the University of the Aegean, Dimitris Ballas, and he wrote a news item for a local newspaper about that. At the time of when the crisis was at its peak in 2015 in summer, refugees would land in this point, and some of them would put their clothes there to dry. Everywhere there were At some point in August 2015, there has been an estimated 20,000 people stranded in Mytilene without being able to leave because all the ferry boats were booked capacity due to the high peak tourist season. So they were everywhere. So you can imagine the Mytilene, as I said, is a city of 40,000 people, 20,000 people everywhere in the street. So this was then, and these people were apologizing for putting their clothes there to dry. And my colleague and friend Michalis approached them to explain what this statue is, and they were apologizing. They said, "We're really sorry, we don't mean any offense." And he said, "No, I wanted to explain to you what this statue is symbolizing." And then when he told them, they said, "This is our mother too." Oh. So it's quite a nice. Another example. I mean, there's so many examples like that across. It's been absolutely amazing, despite the crisis, to be there and view manifestations of humanity by the local population and also volunteers. So just some stats. You may be familiar with that as a cartogram showing arrivals of refugees in 2015. This is drawn by my good friend and colleague Ben Henning, who's now based at the University of Iceland. This is using data on arrivals. I think the accurate figure for 2015 is probably more approximately to 1 million for Greece in 2015. So approximately 1 million people went through Greece in 2015. About half of that came through Lesvos. So if you reflect on the numbers I described, this is what happened just 1 year, 2015. In August, September, October, these were the peak months. I think October was 136,000 people arriving. Massive numbers arriving in this island. And to put some perspective, this is the arrivals between 2006 and 2014, so over 8 years. For the whole of Europe, most of them would go to Italy, then Greece, and then Spain. So you can see the contrast here. That's in 1 year. This is over 8 years. By using this cartogram, I'm trying to. I would like to put some perspective in some context in relation to the numbers, but also to. This is a reminder that the refugee crisis has been there for quite a while. There have always been refugee flows to Europe, and in Lesvos there has been a long tradition of volunteers helping, but nothing in relation to the numbers that we are seeing today. And this is just in the first 2 months of 2016. Again, you can see that's just before the EU-Turkey deal was signed and put into effect. I will talk a bit more about that in a moment. So this is the context. This is the map of Lesvos. And back in 2015, most of the arrivals would come to the northern beaches of Lesvos. This bit here, I don't know if you can see, it's in the border. The closest stretch is 4.1 miles between Greece and Turkey. And we were there seeing the dinghy boats in August. As I said, that was high peak season. You could see that together with tourist boats. So it was a bit surreal. But overall, because the weather was nice back then, most of them would arrive safely and people would welcome them and in the beach, both locals and tourists. However, when people arrived in this part of the island and everywhere in the island, but as I said, mostly in the north, because there was no preparation for them in terms of infrastructure, but also legal as well, it wasn't legal for them to use any transport to go to Mytilene. So there was no way to register there. And it was against the law for anyone to give them a lift. If you want to give a lift to a refugee who arrived, you were breaking the law. So a lot of the people would break the law, but most of the refugees would walk all this distance. I think that's about 80 kilometers. And this has happened before, as I said, 2006, 2007, there has been refugee flows. There would be the same issue, but very small numbers. And there has been a fantastic effort here in Kaloni, an NGO called Agalia, which aimed at giving shelter to people. They knew that people would walk and stop there, so they would give them some shelter and food so that they can continue to come to Mytilene. In 2015, there was an emergency situation. Thankfully, there was a legislation put in place making it legal for people to give refugees a lift. So if you called the police and said, "I'm giving a lift to a refugee, this is my car registration number," that was fine. And then eventually there has been more organized efforts to bring people to Mytilene and arrange for transportation further onwards to mainland Greece. So this is Mytilene area, and just I'd like to say a few words about what's happening with the refugee camps at the moment. There is the camp of Moria here, which is more like a detention center, like a prison. It has been there before, but again dealing with small numbers. And then after 2015, there has been a municipal camp called Karatepe, which is around here, and also near the airport on the other side, towards the south of Mytilene. There is a volunteer grassroots initiative, PICPA, which has also its grassroots volunteers who are also hosting refugees. So all these three, PICPA and Moria, were there before. Karatepe was developed in 2015, from 2015 onwards, and so this is Moria, Karatepe, and PICPA. We may have time, I'm conscious of time, we may have time to discuss this in detail, so I can use these maps for reference if anyone is interested to see how this works in terms of social cohesion and social geography in Lesvos as well. So throughout 2015, we've been there, we saw amazing, inspiring acts of humanity, local volunteers doing everything from just smiling and making people feel welcome to giving money and clothes or food, or even arranging for the burial of the funerals of bodies that washed ashore. So amazing actions of humanity, mostly led by volunteers, but increasingly having also what is termed as Volunteers International, which is very interesting what's going on in Lesvos at the moment. And Vicky is going to talk about the work of the NGO Office of Displaced Designers, which is led by international volunteers who came around, and a lot of them are now staying in the island. So there has been a lot of local NGO tradition in the island. This is a reference to the NGO Agaya, which means embrace, and this was the NGO set up back in 2006-07 in Kaloni that I mentioned, where they would provide shelter to people when they were walking all the way to Mytilene. They also helped massively in 2015, and this NGO won an award by Papastratis, who founded it, died around the same time as Island, the boy who died in the Turkish shore around the same time in September 2015, and this is a picture in memoriam of both of them. This NGO won a Council of Europe award for their work, for amazing work. As an example, there are more examples like that. Also, British volunteers, Eric Kempson, he appears in the local news in Britain, I think, a lot. He lives in Lesvos. He and his wife and their daughter settled there in the 90s, and he did also amazing work. And also, you might be familiar with the grandmothers of Lesvos, who were amongst the nominees for the Nobel Peace Prize last year. I have some links there with videos. I don't have time to show it here today, but you can leave a copy of the PowerPoint. There's a lot of links there to follow if you want. And these grandmothers, they helped feeding a baby. That's a famous photograph of them. And this is has a prominent spot at the Mytilene International Airport. When you arrive, it's the grandmothers feeding this baby next to the mother who is just changed to dry clothes. And so they and the fisherman were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And this was 2015. There has been a crisis, but also at the same time sources of optimism across Europe. And then we have the EU-Turkey deal, which changed everything in Europe and in the island. In particular, we have a situation where people, before this deal came into effect, most of the refugees would move on to mainland Greece, and they would try to make their way to northern Europe. As part of the EU-Turkey deal, they are not allowed to leave the island, even though there is no passport control between Lesvos and mainland Greece. There are checks by Coast Guard, so it's nearly impossible for anyone to board a ferry boat. So they are stranded in Lesvos. They have basically two options: either apply for asylum in Greece, or go back. They are deported back to Turkey. And if their asylum application is rejected, then they are deported to Turkey. And I think as part of the deal Turkey, then there is an agreement to take one refugee from Turkey. I don't know to what extent how this works in practice, but you can imagine the humanitarian impact of all that. And then since then, there has been an increased policing effort of the border, strengthening of Frontex, the European Border Police, and also camps like Moria, the camp I mentioned earlier. They were taken over by the Greek army, and this was quite off-putting for volunteers, both local and international. And this is more like a detention center. Thankfully, the Greek High Court deemed it illegal to detain people for more than a month. So people are free to leave Moria and go around the island, but still a lot of them don't have where to stay, so they go back to this prison to sleep. Not always. There are some squats as well around the island that sometimes are preferable, especially in the winter when it snowed. But the thing is that they are allowed to leave if they want since this High Court decision. So in terms of data, again, we probably can't see this very clearly, but the numbers have dropped significantly. There are still people arriving, but most of them now are picked up by Frontex. The numbers are very small, so they're picked up before they land into the Greek islands, and then they are taken to Moria for processing, as they call it, a terrible term. Then we have the situation I just described. So before I hand over to Vicky, I'd like to show you some photographs that I and my students from the University of Sheffield have taken. We have the hashtag Geo252, which is the module hashtag. I had a Twitter competition, and the winners in this field classes got a bottle of Ouzo on our way back. So there was a good way, I thought, to put together photographs and information from the field classes, so you can find more there if you use this hashtag in Twitter, if you use Twitter. You can see some examples there. This is Mohammed from Morocco, Phil, who tweeted that and took this photograph. One of my PhD students who came along as a staff on the field class. His wife and her friends made superhero capes in Sheffield to give to the refugee kids when we arrive, as a way of having something that is easy to carry, and then distributed that. And this is Mohammed with his superhero cape. That's just before the EU-Turkey deal, and then this camp, this volunteer camp next to Moria was dismantled by the police after we left. So, and we have very strong reasons to believe that Mohammed was one amongst the people who were deported. Because, again, another issue, there are experts probably in this room who know much more about this than myself, but there is a sort of discrimination against people coming from different nationalities. If you are from a particular nation, and Morocco would come in this category, you would be less likely to be granted asylum in Greece and be seen as an economic migrant. So here are some more photos from this. And also, this is a rumors buster. The volunteers did fantastic work. They providing tea, laundry facilities, and also things like rumors. What are the rumors around Europe, and what is true and what is not true? Some more photographs here, being conscious of time. And this is from Eric Kempson's efforts. We went to see him with a field class in 2016, and he took over a derelict hotel with other volunteers in northern Lesvos and tried to develop it into a reception center. This was fought by some of the locals on the grounds that it would had a negative effect on tourism, and also eventually, due to the EU-Turkey deal, this effort was abandoned. But that's another example. And these photographs, again, you can find more on this Twitter page, as I mentioned. And this is a map that we scanned that Eric gave us. It's used by volunteers to help saving people's lives in the sea, so they know where. This is the coast of Turkey and the coast of Lesvos, the eastern coast of Lesvos, and they knew they would use this. They would have people guarding and going to sea to try and save people. These are the life vests I mentioned. We visited this mountain of life vests, a lot of baby ones as well. This is really amazing. Quite shocking. And this is also when the EU-Turkey deal was about to be put into effect. There were massive demonstrations considering the size of Mytilene against the EU-Turkey deal. And then, since then, the population of refugees who arrived, the ones that came after the EU-Turkey deal, as I said, they can't leave the island. So I think there's an estimate of 4,000 refugees now in the camps of Moria, Karatepe, and also there has been efforts to rent accommodation for some of them in apartments in the city and houses in the city. So we have, since 2016, since the EU-Turkey deal, things changed with regards to where the refugees can go. There have been overwhelmingly, in my opinion, more, again, manifestations of solidarity and protest against the EU-Turkey deal. There has also been, however, protests by people supporting the far-right neo-Nazi groups in Greece. And also, for example, one of the things that became apparent was that there was a need for kids to go to school, and there has been a fantastic effort to do that. Like refugee kids go to Greek schools, but there have been, unfortunately, some instances where parents would complain about that. Before I hand over to Vicky, we can say more about the local and the refugee populations, and also in relation to the impact of the situation after the EU-Turkey deal. I'd like to show you a very short 2-minute video which recaps to some extent what I saw. It starts with, it's in Greek, but you will see in the beginning angry parents arguing that they don't want the kids in their schools. It's in Greek, but you can get the message. And then after that, there is some footage of now and then, 21st century and 20th century. The refugees arriving 20th century and 21st century. As the producers of this video say, the only difference is that the 20th century is black and white footage and the 21st century is color. So I'll put that on before I hand over to Vicky.
Δεν μπει κανένα από αυτά μέσα. Μπορούν να μας εξασφαλίσουν ότι το παιδί μου δεν θα πάθει τίποτα.
Θα έχουμε ζημιές στις εικόνες.
Είναι σαν να είναι τσιγκάνι.
Θα έχουμε ζημιές στο σχολικό το κτίριο, σε Φρανία, σε Ντουβάρια.
Κουβαλάνε και τόση βρωμιά.
Δεν λέμε, άνθρωποι είναι για αλλά εμείς είμαστε.
Θα μας σκίσουν ελληνική σημαία.
Okay.
So, like Dimitris just mentioned, after the EU-Turkey deal, there were much less arrivals in Lesvos. People were stuck in the camps. They were waiting and waiting for long periods of time. Not just that, they didn't even know how long they would have to wait for. So this was when the organization that I volunteered for, the Office of Displaced Designers, this is when it was founded by two architects, one from London, one from New York, Sharin and Kimberly. So the way it all started was that they were, Sharin was first volunteering at the Karatepe camp that Dimitris has mentioned. And she was volunteering with an organization called Humanitarian Support Agency. She volunteered there for quite a while, and that was in the first days when an emergency response was urgently needed. Then she was joined by Kimberly. And that was when they met all these amazing, interesting people with all kinds of creative backgrounds. There were people with degrees that they had finished higher education, but there were also experienced craftsmen. There were younger people as well who had who wanted to learn new skills, that were interested in design and generally education and learning. So the one thing that all these people had in common was that they missed working, that they missed purpose. They wanted something to do with their day. They were bored at the camp. After a while, they could leave the camp, but they had nowhere to go. They are not allowed to get a job. So they were also missing the professional side of work and the collaborative side of it. Meeting people, leaving the camp, going into the city, having something to do. They wanted to be useful. At the same time, they were feeling isolated from the Greek community. It was like it was an us and them. The Greek people, well, by that time, Sharif and Kimberly, they had the chance to stay in the island for a while. So they met quite a few Greek people, but also they could see how there was a tradition in the island, in the creative fields, and how there was so much potential on that side as well. And by that time, and as Dimitris mentioned already, the Greek people had responded to the emergency situation immediately. Because this is the human thing to do. It's instant. When you see the crisis unfolding in front of you, you just want to help. Although they had already been hit hard by the economic crisis, they gave it their all, their time, and whatever little resources they had. But after a while, that was all before all the NGOs and the global organizations arrived, which were a great help actually. But the very first immediate response was by the Greek people. After a while, gradually, the local people started feeling left out. They started feeling that the refugee crisis was getting all the attention. So they felt a little bit hard done by. And this is the context where the Office of Displaced Designers was founded in. The purpose of the organization is to bring people together, bring the locals together, bring the displaced people together, to create, to offer a space for a creative community. It was, so the office's headquarters are in town. So we have a creative space there, and we offer workshops and classes and events for everyone to meet and learn and create together. At the individual level, both refugees and locals, they can learn new skills, but also it's mostly about gaining confidence, boosting their confidence, their self-esteem, but not just confidence in themselves, confidence in other people as well. They have to learn to trust all over again after all the things that they've been through. But also at the community level, it's our hope is to bring social cohesion and create a network in the community. So this is something that happens through the course of time. But also some of the participants at the office, they come back for continuing projects. Once their confidence is boosted, they come back and they want to give back and offer more. So the previous one, this was the very first. This was the pilot project of the office, and it was at the Karatope camp, where they actually, where the refugees actually built the tables that we are using in the office now. And that was a very useful project, so that we could get feedback, see what works, and we keep testing things and we keep evolving. The next big project, which was a more long-term project, was the Olive Grove outdoor cinema and gym. So the Danish Red Cross that is running psychosocial programs, tasked the office to create a recreational space, and that is at the Moria camp, the one that Dimitris mentioned that looks like a prison, and where you find the worst situation. And so that was an extension of these programs by the Red Cross. They provided the tools and with materials that you could find in the island, more like upcycling and anything you could source from the local community. The refugees, they built themselves this outdoor cinema, and then moved on to build a gym as well. And that is for use both by the refugees and the local community. So this is another space where the two communities can come together. There were a few challenges, but besides the ones that you would expect, restraints of camp life and local laws. The weather was extremely bad this winter. In January there was extreme snowfall. But everyone was there. The bonding had already been done. They pulled through. So this is what the cinema looks like. It's also they also wanted to use it as a multi-purpose space as well, for picnics and music events and play board games, anything that can bring people together. And the next project was a workshop, and that was at the headquarters in town. It was a documentary filmmaking workshop, and that was the first good example of how the two communities came together, where we had 5 participants from the refugee community and another 5 from the local community. The main themes were resilience, self-esteem, and it was so the participants had to create very short films, very short videos based on these themes. On the very first day, if you show the next slide, everyone was shy. the refugees were sitting on the one side, the local community on the other side. No one knew what to expect. By the end of the workshop, everyone had become friends. There was acceptance. People were hugging. These friendships have lasted. And it was, I believe we have time to show some examples of the work that was done. I've selected two films, one from the refugee community and one from the local community. So this one is from the refugee community. It's called One Day. It was created by this displaced journalism journalist he was a journalist in his home country in Afghanistan. By the time that he took part of the workshop, it had been a long time since he last had used the camera or had the chance to tell his own story. So he was so happy. At the beginning he was so timid. And then, after taking part in this workshop, you could see him smiling, and you could see the difference in his confidence, just in the way he was walking and bearing himself. And this, I keep on about him because I'm quite proud. I think this is one of our success stories. And he keeps coming back, borrowing the equipment, creating new projects. He even, his confidence reached those levels where, when I don't know if you know of Amanda Palmer, who is a well-known American performer, and she had ties to the UK as well. Well, anyway, she visited Lesvos, and he even met her, and they were discussing collaborating on a project together. So I'm feeling very proud, and this is his project. It's about the experiences of refugees and locals during the span of a day. this was Friden's project. Yes, so from the local side, I teamed up with It's okay. So, so this is going to be the video from the local community. So FECL3, she's working in the island. She's a land registrar, and she has a law degree. She also has a very creative side as well. And she wanted to highlight the issue of refugee children going to school, joining the Greek school. She was volunteering at this camp called Pikpa, where she met this little Syrian girl, and her name is Sajida, hence the title of the film. And she wanted to tell Sajida's story. Back in September 2016, it was time for her to go to school. And it was also the time when there were all these discussions on whether children should, the refugee children should join the Greek kids at school. And we wanted to tell that story, but we also wanted to protect little Sajida. We didn't want to put her through the process of filming for the documentary. And we came up with the idea of using a stop motion film. So this is like an animation film where we used more than 1,000 photographs. And when you play them in quick succession, it becomes animated. It's a bit like it's the way the Wallace and Gromit films work, for example. So we hadn't realized how long it would take from initially, because for such a film it can take months, but we only had a few days. So the main characters, they are all different fruit. The little kids are mandarins. The parents that are pro-refugee, they are an apple, a carrot, the sweet fruits, the sour fruits, the lemons and the grapefruit. They are the parents that are anti-refugee, and they're trying to prevent the refugee children to go to school. Yeah, so the sweet banana is the teacher who is trying to mediate things. If you would like to show the video, the Greek effort.
Duro hala matuki Shilbumay Anuhay Rafauran Hamadura matuki.
So there were a lot more projects after that. Every time it was a moving experience. Everyone coming together, realizing how many things we all have in common. This is from a photography image making workshop. A Portuguese volunteer visited Lesvos and she taught people how to make cyanotypes. This one is when MetaLab, a team from Harvard, visited and they offered this audio workshop called Sounds of Lesvos, creating audio, creating soundscapes of the city and the island.